Okay, so here we are. Now what we have is we have the demo, the paths are ready to be set up, so we need to go on and actually put some color in these. So if you look at the paths, we have the D, the E, the M, the O. We look at the layers. I have a background layer which is white. I have a layer called back brushes. We'll put some brushes on that layer on the background. I have a D layer to get started off, and then I have a letter brushes layer to put brushes onto the letters later on. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with this D layer. I'm going to fill in my D with color. So I go to my Paths palette. I double click the D picture to activate it. You can see the anchors. It is now active. My Path tool is active as well. Over in my tool options, I choose selection from path. Now my D is selected, which means I can only color in that. I go to my layers palette. I have my D layer active. Excellent. So I go to my paint bucket. I'm going to fill with a paint bucket right now. I'm going to choose a light blue, hit OK, click in the D. This fills it in with color. I'm going to go back. I'm going to repeat this process. So I go back to my paths, double click my E. It is now selected. I go to my paths. I make a new path, and I'm going to call this, up on the left there, call that E. Okay, I have an E layer now. I do selection from path. Now my E is selected. I go to paint bucket, and just to be visible, I'm going to go with a different color. I'm going to go green, hit OK, paint bucket inside the E, cool. Go to my paths, double click my M. My M is now active. I go to my layers, I make a new layer, I make an M. You should see the pattern here. I go to my paint, let's see here, I choose selection from path. Now my M is active. I go to my paint bucket, I will choose a red. Once again for visibility, I have an M, red M, my M layer. Paths, double click the O, choose selection from path, go to my layers, make a new layer, call it O, go to my paint bucket, and I'll take an orange, click inside. So now all my letters are done. Now, let's say that I want to change the order up. I want to have my D in front of my E and my M in front of my O and the E. I'm in my layers. In your layers over here on the right, whatever's on top of the stack is in front. So I go to my D, I click and I drag it up in front. The D is now in front of the E. I go to my M, I drag it in front of the O. It is now in front. Now notice in my orange, O is still selected. I'm going to deselect this. I can do this by going to Select and choose None. But the shortcut is Command-Shift-A, and you're going to use it all the time. So we're going to do that. Command-Shift-A, the O is deselected. Now, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an outline on all of these letters. This is pretty much the same process in many ways. So I'm going to start off with my D, so I'm going to go to my D layer. I'll go back to my paths. I will double click my D path. The D is now active. Now over on my colors on the left side here, I'm going to change to a black outline. I can do this. There's a small button, it's a little black and white square next to my colors. I'll click that. My default's back to black. And since my path tool is active, since I activated the D path, I will hit stroke path. Now, this will default to 6 pixels. Generally between 20 and 40 is good for what we do. I set mine at 30. I hit stroke. You can see that the D is now outlined. I'm going to repeat this process. I'm going to double click my E to make my E active. Go to my layers. Go to my E layer. Now, my path stuff is all the same. I hit stroke path. It's still set at 30, it's still black, I hit stroke. There's the E, that's done. Back to my paths palette, double click the M, go to my layers, go to the M layer, stroke path, hit stroke, go back to my paths palette, double click the O, go to my layers, click on the O layer, stroke path, hit stroke, and bang, all of my stuff is outlined. Now, it looks a little odd. That's just because the paths are still active. So I'm going to go over to my paths palette and I'm going to hit the eyeball right next to the path, turn those off, and I'll click off any other tool, and now you can see what your letters will look like with an outline and a color in the inside. The next step will be to put the brush